Well, good evening, folks. It is 7 p.m. and it is Tuesday, September 14th, 2021. We're in the council chambers in Platteville, Wisconsin for the regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Platteville. And we'll start with our roll call. Candace.
Eileen Nichols,
Here.
Kathy Kopp,
Here.
Jason Arts,
Here.
Lynn Parrott,
Here.
Isaac Shanley,
Here.
Barbara Doss,
Here.
Ken Killian.
Here.
Okay, the first thing on our agenda is a presentation by one of our newest, I guess I would call them partners. So I would invite Renee Cranbuell to come to the microphone. Renee is the Executive Director of Family Connections of Southwest Wisconsin, and Family Connections of Southwest Wisconsin is housed in OE Gray, which was recently transferred from the school district to the city. So Renee.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I appreciate that you put me on the agenda. As you said, I'm the Executive Director of Family Connections. As a renter, I felt it was important that I come and introduce myself and let you know what Family Connections does. I put together a little information sheet that I've given to all of you, just that lists some of the things that we do. It's my sheet as well, so I'm just going to kind of go through this. You can follow along, but I felt it important that you have this, so if you need to refer back to it, you've got this information. Family Connections is a nonprofit organization. We serve 6 counties: Grant, Iowa, Lafayette, Vernon, Richland, and Crawford. We were established in 1998 as a child care resource and referral agency. Our location has been many places. We've been in Boscobel, we moved to Fenimore, and we've been in multiple spots here in Platteville. We've been in the 08 Gray building since 2013. We rent 2 rooms. We rent a set of offices, room number 1 and room number 2 is a classroom that we rent. We also rent a closet off the gymnasium that we store all our extra supplies in. In 2020, the focus of Family Connection changed and we became a family resource center where we can serve families and childcare providers. We provide resources and services to support all families, childcare providers. Some of the things that we do are listed here. We have a lending library with resources on family issues, child development, developmentally appropriate behavior. We have ages and stages developmental growth series. We have a huge community closet that supplies diapers and wipes and personal items. We are fortunate enough to be the recipient of High Vibe. They do a diaper fundraiser every year. Last year, they donated over 13,000 diapers to us, which was amazing. It completely filled our closet. So anytime anybody needs any of those supplies, they can come and just take them for free. We do weekly play and learn groups. We started those up again in May. We, of course, didn't do them through COVID. Our offices were open and we were available through COVID. And anytime anyone would call, we would come in and meet them. I myself have only been in the position since November of this year, so I'm fairly new to it as well. So I'm still learning as we go, but they were able to be open and supply anything that people needed. So those play and learn groups we opened in May, and we do those every Thursday morning. We provide car seats for those that qualify. We provide installation and inspection of car seats if anybody's in need of that. We have a teacher resource room that is full of supplies. We have a die cut machine, a laminator. So a lot of the teachers that are in our building through Head Start come and use that, or a childcare provider can come and use it. There's a very minimal fee. We have that teacher resource room. We have an equipment lending library, which includes pack and plays and strollers. We have a lot of sensory therapy items. So anytime anybody would need anything like that, if we got grandparents coming or grandchildren coming for the weekend, we can lend those out to you. We've got a very large supply of that lending stuff. And we also do family fun events. We were fortunate enough to get 2 grants this year through the Community Foundation Fund. We got a grant from Platteville and we were able to host 3 evening family events right there at OE Gray. We were able to do them outside. They were called This Way to Nature Play, just things that we could get the kiddos outside and bring families. We did them at night so all families could attend. They were very well attended. We had a lot of fun. And then we also got money from Darlington. I'm from Darlington, so that's my connection to Lafayette County. We did 5 there. We have 1 more left in October. So we did them starting in June through October. Services we hope to start to offer again are those parenting classes, provider and teacher make and take events, workshops. We were able to get a grant through the state of Wisconsin, the Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Board. We were able to get a grant just this year. And so we were able to hire a parent educator. So we have a part-time parent educator that we're hoping to do a lot more with as things open up. Some of the donations that we rely on, completely on donations, grants, and fundraising. We get money from the United Way of Platteville, the Optimist Club, Community Foundation of Greater Dubuque. We get a monthly stipend from the Platteville Thrift Store, which is amazing. Those are those two foundation grants that we got through Platteville and Darlington. And the biggest one that we just recently got was that Wisconsin Child Abuse and Neglect Prevention Board. The object of this grant is to build, we were one of 10 family resource centers in the state of Wisconsin that got one. So we're very fortunate to have gotten it. One of the main goals of this grant is to build an infrastructure within the family resource centers. So all the family resource centers are offering the same services to everyone throughout the state. This is for 1 year. We're hoping that we get renewed for a second year. And after that second year, the information that they're going to gather from this grant, they're hoping to be able to present it to the state budget committee, and hopefully, cross our fingers, they might allocate regular annual funding for family resource centers. So that's the goal of this, is to in the future that we're able to get regular funding to support the work that we do. Those are some of the things that we do. Our website is there at the bottom. Please feel free to check us out on our website. We try to keep it as current as we possibly can. We also have an active Facebook page where we post all our events and things that we're offering to families. And if you want to stop over, we're more than happy to give you a tour. We're very, very happy at OE Gray. So we utilize the space really well.
And Renee, is OE Gray your only actual facility?
It is.
Okay, so you serve all your counties from this location in Platteville.
We do. We typically don't go up into Richland, Vernon, and Crawford County. We pretty much offer the services to Iowa Grant and Lafayette, just because that's where we're closely located, but we're hoping to expand out. We would never expand our offices, but yeah.
Your program.
Mm-hmm.
And do you have any clue how many families or children or units, I don't know, that you serve?
In a year?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I would say with each, this is not our typical
Right.
year. And I can't speak to pre-COVID because I wasn't a part of the program, but the services, the children that we have at each of the events, we get anywhere between 30 and 40 kiddos. So that's great. We do, Ellen does a car seat installation almost monthly, pretty much monthly. We're hoping to expand into our Hispanic population as well, because we have a huge Hispanic community in Darlington. So we're in the process also of getting all our materials translated into Spanish. But as far as families, we keep that communication log. We have at least one person every day coming in for help or a call, needing help, needing assistance, right? We can direct them on where to go to get the help that they need. Mm-hmm.
Anybody else on council have questions of Renee? Well, it's good to hear from you.
Awesome. Thanks so
And,
much for having me.
And
I
like we
appreciate
said,
the
you're welcome
information.
to stay for the rest of the meeting. But you're also
Thank you.
welcome to return home.
I appreciate it. Thanks again.
Thank you, Renee.
Before we move to consideration of the consent calendar, I have a couple of things I want to say. First of all, I want to do a great big shout out to all of those people who were involved in the Dairy Days celebration this weekend. A fabulous event, great parade. We saw Lynn in the parade. We heard Kathy announcing the parade. We saw Isaac walking along the parade. So a huge shout out to everyone involved in all aspects of Dairy Days. I thought it was a great event where people could come together. So, Oh, Adam was handing out candy. I actually didn't get any candy.
I
from
was
Adam.
running
get
more.
it.
I wasn't handing out candy. I was running, trying to keep up with the car.
Oh, you were running.
I tried to give as many kids, my daughter and I tried to give as much candy as we could to kids.
All right. Okay, Jason, were you in the parade too?
I was not. I
Oh.
was camping this weekend.
You were camping.
Camping one,
Okay,
very good.
there we go. All right, the second thing I want to announce at this point in time is that the first item on our information and discussion agenda tonight, the residential development project potential, which some of you are obviously here for, the Golden Heights subdivision proposal, that there is no information to present on that tonight. The person who would make that presentation isn't here and doesn't intend to be here.
Yeah, I can give a quick update, I guess, to everybody here. So based on kind of the feedback, I think that the developer property owner heard, they're actually working with their engineers on kind of coming up with two different site plans. One obviously would be the potential of a plan unit development. We're not quite sure what that means as far as retooling, but the other site plan that they're working on is basically, it would be single family homes that are 100% within the ordinance. So they would be looking to maximize the amount of lot sizes that are available within our ordinance and presenting that. So the intention is that would be coming back to the next meeting that we have here for information only, so that the council is aware of it. And then essentially it would be forwarded to the Plan Commission to be reviewed for kind of the formal process, where then that'll really get into kind of the nitty gritty of a lot of the concerns that have been brought up, and rightful concerns from property owners surrounding it in regards to kind of traffic, sidewalks, everything else. So the plan right now is that on the 28th, the developer owner of the property will be coming back and kind of presenting as an information session only the two updated site plans that they're looking at doing. And then those plans then would go to the Planning Commission to be officially kind of discussed, and a recommendation would be made, and then come back to the council for formal action, just like anything else.
So the council would not be taking action on this until at least probably October at the.
Correct,
Oh,
because
November maybe.
essentially it comes to the council as information, because again, as the elected body, you are the final decision
Right.
with anything. So.
But it does have to go through plan.
And with anything, it goes to the Planning Commission, because they are the recommendation body that the council has appointed to review all kind of site plans and determinations and kind of get into the nitty gritty of discussions. So that is the plan. So yes, the intention is to have the developer come back, they'll do an information session, and then it would go to the Planning Commission for the official kind of review and recommendation from the Planning Commission.
Okay, and so for those in the audience, the Plan Commission meets most generally, unless there's some holiday or some other thing that interrupts the schedule. It meets the first Monday of the month at 7 p.m. So the next meeting of the Plan Commission is the 4th of October, and Joe and Howard would post the agenda about at least on Thursday before, if not before that. So, and it would be posted under the Plan Commission area of the website, not the council agenda, because it would be a Plan Commission. So the next two meetings of the Plan Commission are October 4th, the first Monday in October, and then November 1st, the first Monday in November. But the regular procedure is that any development first has to go to the Plan Commission, and then after a Plan Commission recommendation comes to the council. One other question I have, Adam, deals with covenants. I've read a lot of messages that, you know, the city needs to honor these covenants.
Mhm. So covenants it depends. So for instance, as an example, in the Platteville area industrial development corporation, or our industrial park, because the city owns that land, we then were able to put restricted covenants on those properties. So with any property owner that wants to put restricted covenants, that is up to them to put those covenants on and then essentially enforce that. So if it expires, or, you know, that is not the city that dictates the requirements. That's basically our municipal code, unless we own the property. Then it's up to the city if we want to put further restrictions outside of our municipal code on that. So in this instance with the Golden Heights subdivision, that was a private development. So that developer or that property owner had the right then to legally put a restricted covenant on the property. Now, typically with those, there is a time frame, and if they're not renewed, then it's up to either that property owner to reinstitute them, or essentially if they expire, if it's a new property owner, that property owner then has the right to create a new restricted covenant that would be required for if they're selling any lots. It's the same thing. You, before signing it, you have to agree that you are going to follow the rules that are in any restricted covenant.
So we have ordinances,
Correct.
but a developer or a property owner can,
Can have
Can
additional
establish
restrictions,
additional
correct.
restrictions.
That would be above and beyond.
okay. So I wanted to make those two announcements before we went on, in case there are people who were here specifically to speak on that agenda item, because we won't be addressing that item tonight.
I have a question.
Certainly.
My question is, as far as appearance of the units, appearance of the houses, will there be any setup as far as the housing association that will outline what these houses can look like as a minimum?
So
Are
we have,
talking about the same thing or something different? 'Cause
so, right, so
when I look at pictures of what he has brought here,
yep.
and the appearance of those housing units, will the overall development show an apparent theme
Sure.
possibly, or
Uh,
is everybody going to be doing something different as far as what they're building, their housing units going to look like?
Right, good question. So essentially, it depends on if you're asking what the city can do. If it is a planned unit development that is being proposed, as the city, there are certain requirements or restrictions in lieu of approval, almost like a conditional use permit, whereas if somebody's trying to do something as the city, you have the ability to put additional parameters, requirements. It has to look a certain way. It has to be made of certain materials. Those are things that you can look at in a planned unit development. If it is based on, if all the developer or the property owner is looking at doing is developing based on what is in our municipal code, then it's our municipal code. So what they would be able to do then is the restricted covenant is what they could put on the property as an addition, which would address what you're asking, is they could have in a restricted covenant that if you're going to build a house on there, it has to be a certain type of vinyl, the side, they can determine siding, windows, stories, heights, yard restrictions, landscaping, etc. So that's something, obviously, when the property owner returns and presents kind of what his plans are, and that goes through the planning commission process, there'll be the opportunity to kind of ask that and address that to make sure that obviously it's compatible with what we're looking for as a city, and to ensure that it is something that within the surrounding neighborhood fits into the other properties that are already there.
As far as upkeep, will there be guidance as far as upkeep of the whole area, as far as an association carrying this out?
Sure. So that's,
We don't have a rental inspection.
No.
So how are we going to do, how this could be done?
so if it is depending on how the property owner wants to do it, if they're going to do it as like a homeowners association or something along those lines, it would be whatever the guidelines are in the homeowners association plus our municipal code. So just like any property, they have to follow, as the planning commission is discussing, as both council members Shanley and Doss know, we're going through a kind of a review of chapter 5, which is our weeds, kind of lawn maintenance and everything else. So if they don't have any type of homeowners association or a restricted covenant that would require them to do additional property maintenance, it would just be like any other home that we have in the city or property that has to follow our municipal code in regards to maintenance, upkeep, which then would be our code enforcement officer and our building inspector ensuring, and Director Carroll and Director Crowfoot, to ensure they're complying with the city's municipal ordinance.
But unfortunately, we see in the city quite a range in the way some of these properties look.
Right.
So that what my concern is that these properties follow, whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
A code, so that they can be something that is good appearing, et cetera, and so forth.
Yeah, so that's certainly something when, if the developer is looking at going into a plan unit development, which would require an additional approval from the plan commission and the council. If that is something that we want to look to add to it, I believe, we're going to want to get a municipal attorney consideration on that to ensure that we're not overstepping our bounds as a city. But I think it's certainly a legitimate question that we could propose, is in lieu of approving the changing of a road or allowing additional structures outside of what our code dictates. There is the opportunity potentially that we could put some type of restriction or additional requirement in regards to your concerns, Ken, with lawn maintenance, with property and certain things like that. I think we would want to get the interpretation, but when we get, knee deep into kind of those specifics, certainly we can get our municipal attorney's opinion to ensure that if we have the ability to do that, then it's up to you as a council if that's something you want to add as an additional requirement.
Thank you.
Okay, let's now return to the agenda. So the next, first item and the only action item on our agenda tonight is consideration of the consent calendar. So the following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature or previous discussion. Please indicate if you would prefer separate discussion and action. So first, we have the council minutes from August 19th, special meeting, and the August 24th regular meeting. We have payment of bills. We have the financial reports for August. We have appointments to boards and commissions. And tonight I have two persons that are both being appointed to the Redevelopment Authority. One is Mike Mayer and the other is Trent Udelhoven. Licenses tonight, temporary Class B to serve fermented malt beverages to Roundtree Gallery for a Rand Atkinson book reading and signing on Saturday, September 25th from 4 to 6. We have 1- and 2-year operator licenses to serve alcohol. And we have our annual Grant County Highway Construction Aids request. So do I hear a motion?
I move to approve the consent calendar.
Second. Okay, Candace, we have a motion and a second to approve the consent calendar. We'll vote.
Nichols?
Yes.
Cop?
Yes.
Arts?
Yes.
Parrot?
Yes.
Shanley?
Yes.
Doss?
Yes.
Killian?
Yes,
Motion carries.
Okay, under citizens' comments, observations, and petitions, if any, I had 2 pieces of paper before me, but both of those folks were here for the development in the Golden Heights area. We do welcome 2 students tonight who are in Intro to Infrastructure. And so thanks for attending. We'll move on now to the reports that are in your packet, board, commission, and committee minutes from the Historic Preservation Commission, Ken.
no addition.
Police and Fire Commission, Kathy.
No additions.
Parks, Forestry and Recreation, Jason.
No further additions.
The Housing Authority Board, Ken.
No addition.
And the Library Board, Lynn.
No addition.
Okay. Other reports in your packet were the Water and Sewer Financial Report for August, the Airport Financial Report for August, the Task Force and on Inclusion, Diversity, and Equity update
Question,
on,
task force.
oh, okay.
I like some information, clarification.
Sure.
I'm looking at what's written there by Adam. It talks about the topic of creating a homeless network guide for the community.
Yes.
So I guess first of all, what does that mean? And the next one is receive calls regarding questions about resources for individuals who identify themselves as homeless. And then also would handle the questions related to homelessness from visitors. So I was wondering about this as far as, are we going to learn how many homeless are in Platteville? What's going to be done about homeless people in Platteville? So I'd appreciate a little information about what's going to be done.
No, certainly. I appreciate the question. So what the task force has been working on is kind of the discussion, and where this, I would say, stemmed from was a couple of conversations between city staff. So obviously with our park and recreation, obviously, since I started here about a year ago, we have known of or have received reports of incidents where, individuals have been within our municipal parks that are homeless. And essentially are aware that they are either sleeping in the park or are in the park area. So that has been something that certainly our park and recreation director, as well as our police department, have received calls and questions on. So one of the things we got from that, also we have had other areas where I have received calls from residents who have had questions about unfortunately, motorhomes being located sometimes within the city and kind of moving from spot to spot within the city because they don't have a actual residence. As well as our library has gotten some questions or sometimes about asking for resources related to homelessness. Where are there particularly shelters? Are there funding resources, different things like that. So where obviously this came up was I received, some questions from council members in regards to what would be the appropriate kind of committee to not tackle, but essentially start looking into this question. So we started with Tide. So essentially we have spent about 2 meetings now kind of bridging the topic of, what could the task force do or look into as potential options or scenarios to look into homelessness. So what we've done is a little bit of research, and we're aware that Grant County does have an actual task force that is related to homelessness. What we found out though is I think due to COVID and obviously due to some volunteer issues, they have not met in about 1.5 years. So that's something that we are looking at trying to kind of tackle a couple of issues. One is if somebody were to contact any city employee or volunteer and ask about homelessness, we want to look at creating what is kind of in here, this homelessness network guide that potentially could be organizations that could assist, whether it be local churches, whether it be local businesses, whether it be county resources, state, federal, you name it. Because right now we have bits and pieces of that where I think if somebody were to ask this last question as a city, we would guide them in certain directions, but it's a bit choppy. So what we want to try to do is create something that is a bit more comprehensive and a bit more standardized across the board that provides kind of those resources. And that's where we're just getting into what I would say is the very early stages of this conversation. So what the group has been tasked with is kind of thinking about potential partners that we could look into, speakers that we could bring in to the Tide committee to have them listen to, and really try to create kind of a network, for lack of a better word, so that when either Tide gets questions as members, if the council, as you as council members were to get questions, we would be able to kind of have this comprehensive guide then that could provide resources to individuals that have that question.
Well, then my question too is, what's going to be the program for the city as far as providing housing for homeless people?
So that's something that's been brought to kind of a question of Tide. And that's something that I'm looking into kind of behind the scenes. So one of the questions, obviously, that I think as a city we can discuss is there are properties that the city owns or is aware of. So the question would be, do we want to create, for lack of a better term, an opportunity for that to be utilized, whether it be renting or, services, those type of things. So that's kind of some of the things Tide is looking into, is creating a question of, as a city, do we have property that either currently, if you think about it, I believe there's a property we purchased by the fire station that potentially we were looking at using for long-term expansion. Potentially that's a consideration that we could talk about as a city, is do we want to get into that type of resource or partner with an organization to have that be utilized. So that's one of the things we're kind of looking at, is that I think also trying to find some different connections where, again, we may not be able to do it as a staff, but if we have connections with partnerships with organizations that, again, we don't want to recreate the wheel. If they're experts at it, can we bring them in and talk about some type of a partnership and then look at funding opportunities through either grants or, have the question of, do we want to put it into the budget? Do we want to put some money aside and look at having that be related towards providing assistance or grants or opportunities? Those are all kind of the things that are brewing in these discussions.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions on that report?
I do have one. I see that the police department is going through, they did a prep for an accreditation audit. Is this normally, this happens every year, Doug, or is this something new or,
This is something very new.
okay,
We went through a mock audit in the latter part of August, and it's part of our accreditation process that we're seeking through the Wisconsin Law Enforcement Accreditation Group. And it goes hand in hand with our use of Lexipol to manage all of our policies and whatnot, to ensure that we're in line with all of the best practices in the field of law enforcement, to include federal and state law. But no, I would view this very much as a feather in our cap when we're successful with this.
that's what I was curious, if it was federal and state law, if that is part of what's going on with this, or they're changing.
It's not mandated. It's something that we've sought out voluntarily. And again, it's been a long process, somewhat delayed by COVID, but we're getting close to the finish line.
Okay, so that was with the department progress reports. Anybody else have questions on any of the other department progress reports?
Well, I have one that's have to look back, but public library. Where's that coming up?
Well, that would be, are you talking about the library board minutes or the public library progress report?
Director's report.
The director's report, okay? Yep,
Okay. I don't have a page number, but anyway, Platteville Public Library Director's Report, August 4th. My first question, I was curious about trying to separate our electrical system from the hotels. And building maintenance specialist Butson is supposed to be working on this. What is going to be the advantage of separation?
When the building was built, it was a combined building. It was done as cost savings to the original developer. But what they've found is that it's difficult to separate the billing for the library versus the hotel for a lot of that. And they've been working, as far as I recall, when we were doing this a few years back, they came up with a what they considered a reasonable split in the billing. What they were thinking is that if they actually do a separation, then it could be separately charged on the billing side.
Do we have separation on water and sewer?
No,
So those two are combined with the hotel.
correct.
Okay. And my other question is down at the bottom. And just curious about the fee, not the fees, but the payment to library assistants and so forth here. And here they're talking about transitioning the 4 15-hour week paid positions into 2 library positions. So I was curious what the rate of pay was for those. And then they were talking, she's talking about 2 library assistant positions, each work 10 hours. So I'm curious about what these people are being paid. I bring it up because of the comment made about the swimming pool and what the people there were being paid. So I'm curious as to what they're being paid over here, even though the library is separate as far as receiving money from the city, and then they can do what they want to do it in general, as far as what the payment is for their salaries, et cetera, and work. So that's one, and I think that might be, I have to take a look here. Yes, this is a department progress report, Luke Peters. And here it says that many of the persons working there, I suppose those are the lifeguards, have indicated they do not intend to return next year due to low pay. So as I said before, what is their pay, especially those given the additional training requirements for maintaining lifeguards certification? So I'd like to find that out. The individuals are not here tonight.
Sure. So we can definitely get back to you on those two questions. What I can tell you is that is a conversation that definitely has come up in the department kind of budget meetings that both Director Maurer and I have been having. So we're kind of looking at a couple of things. One, I think, is based on the indication that we have gotten from Director Peters is, and I can tell you from being on some of the League of Municipality calls and talking to peers, this is it's not just a Platteville specific issue. It definitely is something that is impacting a lot of municipalities in regards to kind of their part-time staff or what are considered assistant positions. It's been, it's a national issue that's kind of being reviewed. So I can certainly have both of them kind of provide you with further information, but I would know that during the budget process, we'll kind of give you some highlights of what's going on with that. So we're looking at both of those areas, not just the library, but kind of across the board with all of our, our museum falls into that category. The city obviously as itself has some positions in regards to part-time or different hour positions. But I will have both of them kind of give you a more detailed response to that.
Thank you.
Okay, those are the reports that were in the packet. There are no action items on our agenda tonight. We took action on the only thing that was on the agenda to take action on. That was the consent agenda. Information and discussion items, as previously mentioned, the residential development project potential. The individual is not ready to present, is not ready to move forward. So that will be delayed to another meeting. B and C, the preliminary plat and planning map for Southwest Health and the rezoning at 860 Mason. Delta 3 is the engineer for these projects. And I guess it was Dan probably that has asked if those could be moved to the end of the information and discussion agenda because there was another meeting.
Correct.
That complicated the situation. So that means for information and discussion tonight, we will start with the residential, the subdivision reimbursement agreement. After the last meeting, I talked to several people on the council, talked to Adam, and we were kind of mixing apples and oranges when we were talking about residential development and a subdivision reimbursement agreement in the same breath. So we have separated that out and we will now just talk because this subdivision reimbursement agreement is not for one developer.
Correct.
This would be a subdivision reimbursement agreement that if we had other developers come, we would extend the same kind of reimbursement agreement to them. So it really is its own policy, its own action. It doesn't really tie to any one development. So that's why it's here separated from the other, and we will always we will discuss this separately from any residential development. So Adam.
Yeah. So again, as we've been talking about kind of as the city of Platteville in our 2021 to 2023 strategic plan, we have the goal of seeking a partnership with a private developer to result in a new single family housing subdivision. So just to kind of bring some history in the past, the city of Platteville has subsidized a portion of infrastructure costs for residential subdivisions to spur growth. Director Carroll indicated around 2004, there was a residential subdivision infrastructure subsidy plan that was put into place for the city of Platteville. At that time, there was about $600,000 that was set aside to assist various developers for this initiative. And at that point in time, it was very much a first come, first serve kind of ability that was available. So what I did is kind of pulled a couple of examples of previous developments which provided subsidy assistance out of that program. So there was the Fox Ridge Development LLC, which was approved by a resolution in 2005 to reimburse the developer 25% of the infrastructure costs incurred by the developer for improvements within the subdivision. There was the Prairie View Subdivision Finance Agreement that was approved by the Common Council in 2006 to award up to $104,500 under the city's housing incentive program, with the understanding the developer potentially could return and request for more. And then another example was the Oak Haven Residential Subdivision Infrastructure Subsidy Agreement, was another project where the developer was able to receive a total of 25% reimbursement of the infrastructure costs incurred. So if you guys remember, as the Common Council, you did direct city staff to work with the city attorney on the drafting of what would be considered a subdivision reimbursement agreement. For consideration to be agreed upon, as Council President Doss indicated, this would be with any developer looking to create a residential subdivision within the city of Platteville. So the draft agreement was obviously attached to this staff note, but it provides kind of the following requirements as a starting point. The developer shall construct all public improvements in accordance with approved development agreement. So again, they would have to enter into a development agreement with the city. The city shall reimburse the developer for costs incurred and paid directly to the construction of the public improvements for the development at a base amount of 25%. So essentially what we would guarantee for any development is whatever the improvements are coming in, we would be looking at bare minimum a 25% reimbursement based on the infrastructure. The city then would have the option to determine if they wish for incentive increases to occur. So again, a developer could receive potentially a 35% or 45% reimbursement on the construction of public improvements if they achieve a certain number of homes built within a certain time frame. So essentially, if a developer is willing to create more homes quickly, we then as a city in turn will provide a higher incentive. The benefit for the city obviously is the sooner that development is done, that's tax base is hitting obviously the city books, whereas the longer it takes, the longer time it would take for the city to see that tax base occur. So that is kind of the reason why you would potentially want to provide some type of an incentive based on the number of homes that they will be doing. One thing to consider in any of these agreements is that the developer would be required to receive all official approvals from the city staff, Plan Commission, and the Common Council. So anything they're doing has to go through the normal process, just like anything else. They got to go through, they have to work with our staff, they have to meet the Planning Commission requirements. It then comes to the council for whatever approvals may be necessary. And then again, the city will have the ability to determine what public improvements are eligible for reimbursement to the developer. So this, I would say, is the biggest area that probably needs to have some discussion from the council, is in regards to our attorney basically kind of created a list and kind of threw the kitchen sink in there of any possible infrastructure you could think of. So what really we want you guys to review as council members is items A through H, which lists the various public improvements eligible for reimbursement. So again, if you look at that agreement, you are going to see that that is going to be found on
Page 179,
page
or
179.
no, farther, sorry,
Yeah, so
page
I think it's page
182.
There you go. Or it's basically the second page of the subdivision reimbursement agreement. So if you look at number 4, it has the public improvement eligible for the reimbursement are limited to the following in which must directly serve the development. There's A, water mains, valves, hydrants, service laterals to the property line, including curb stop and all appurtenances. I may be saying that wrong. B is sanitary sewer mains, manholes, lift stations, siphons, service laterals to the property line and appurtenances. C is storm sewer mains, catch basins, manholes, detention basins, and all appurtenances. Street construction, including compacted base course of breaker and gravel, geotextile fabrics, if approved by the Director of Public Works, curb and gutter, street surface, traffic signals and signs. E, sidewalks, if recovered and approved by the city. So again, that's one that could be up to interpretation. F, electrical, including main lines, transformers, and street lights. and appurtenances, but not including services to the home. G is natural gas, including main lines, valves, but not including services to the home. And H is communications, including basic telephone and cable TV main lines, but not including services at home or other high-speed communications. So I know there were some questions by council members in regards to, what things we want to reimburse. So essentially, it could be all of these. It could be per the agreement. You may decide you may not want to have that in there. But I think, again, you have the option to be as open as you want or as restrictive as you want. So just keep that in mind. So then just to kind of figure everything out here. So budget and fiscal impacts, again, the budgetary impact of any type of agreement is going to depend upon the nature, size, and scope of the residential development being proposed. So in the staff note, I just kind of to provide a reference for council members to review a potential fiscal impact. Let's assume we're discussing the development of a 20-lot single-family home development. The proposal is each home will be estimated to have an assessed value of $275,000. So the proposed infrastructure costs for such a development are estimated to be 1.5 million. So below is kind of a table breakdown of the proposed project. So a 20 single-family home development at $275,000 assessed would generate $5.5 million in assessed value. Just looking at the city of Platteville's tax portion, which is $8.03 right now, that development, when completed, would generate about $44,165 in taxes to the city. Again, with the infrastructure cost of 1.5 million, if we were to look at potentially entering into a subdivision reimbursement agreement, 25% of that infrastructure is 375,000. 35% would be 525,000 and 45% would be 675. So if you're looking at kind of what that would be from an incentive standpoint, there's a percentage there of 7 to 12%. That's pretty typical range for when you're considering whether it would be a tax increment financing percentage or assistance from the city. Sometimes you can go higher, sometimes you can go lower. Again, that's up to you guys as the council to determine. But then what this kind of shows you is the payment structure return on investment. So if you were to reimburse 25%, essentially it would take us 8.5 years to pay off that investment with the taxes that would incur. And then after that 8 years, essentially you're getting, $44,000 into perpetuity. That is the kind of incentive. Again, to spur the development, does it take a little longer? It does, because obviously you're paying more. But eventually in 15 years, we have recouped the costs that we have paid for that incentive. And essentially anything after 15 years is an additional benefit to the city. Now, again, these are very bare bones numbers, and every year the assessment's going to change. So those years could take less depending on if the values continue to go up. So obviously kind of the recommendation here to think about is city staff would encourage council members to review the proposed finance agreement and send any proposed changes, alterations you would like to see to me. The intention would be to have this item back on the agenda on Tuesday, September 28th for potential council action if you would so choose. And then there's the sample motion. And what was provided are a couple of agreements. Obviously you have the draft, and then you have 2 examples that were done back in 2006 and 2005. There you go.
Okay, folks. Now we're talking about, so I would say a development agreement that might be extended to any developer.
Correct.
Okay. What prevents this from being extended to someone in a TIF?
So the TIF would be different because with that, you're dealing with typically a tax abatement or a reinforcement. And because of the fact that it is in a TIF district and has to be kind of approved by the multiple taxing jurisdictions, there's different requirements. So there's different verbiage that has to be in a development agreement, and the funding mechanism is different. So with this one, yes, you're getting taxes, but it's going to the general fund. So it's everybody to kind of think about it. Whereas in a TIF district, it is just that individual project. So the way this is structured is similar, but the fact is it's basically all going to the same general fund account. So what's happening is the entire tax base of the city is essentially assisting in this agreement. Whereas in a TIF district, it is that project. So it's a little bit different.
So my real question is, do we have to specify in this agreement some place that it doesn't involve development in a TIF?
You certainly could. So typically in our TIF agreements, you do have to state that this particular project is in a TIF district. So because of the fact that that's not in there, you don't have to specify it, but I don't think it would hurt anything to say that it isn't.
Yeah, this is not a development
Right.
agreement for people who are developing in a TIF. I say that because I don't know how long we would have this agreement on the books. I mean, I don't think we're looking at reviewing this and then saying, well, it's just for people who develop by December
No,
31st.
so this essentially would be
21. It
correct.
might be for 3 or 4 or 5 years.
Yep.
At which time we might be able to close a TIF and open a TIF.
Correct. So essentially, this
So-
is not in a TIF district. So the parameters are with the development agreement. You would specify in there where it has to specify where it's
So
located.
somehow in here, we have to
Yep.
include something that this is for development that is not in a TIF. Okay. That was one thing that came to mind.
Sure.
Other people, I mean, you've had a chance to read it, other things that you see that you want to talk about.
A couple questions.
Isaac?
So in the previous ones that we've done here, it stated that there was $6,000 set aside or utilized. Now, is this a case where the city's gonna put a set amount of money in and say, all right, here's $500,000. Once this is done, we're done, or are we just gonna come to a per project time this year? Say the old schools project is going on. Next year, Cody comes to town and says, oh, I want to do this, and so we're gonna do it on a yearly deal or set amount. If we do this set amount, where's the money gonna come from? And the amount, which I guess could be negotiated on. And then the second one, I was looking at, your budget impact. So you stated that for, the 25% would be 8.5 years. Now I'm assuming that would be after the project is completed.
Correct.
So a project could take 1 year or it could take 20 years to get completed, and then 8.5 years after that, if I'm correct.
Right. So this is looking at, if you would consider when it's fully built out, it would take 8.5 years to recoup the 375. Now, based on that, what could happen is, just as you kind of indicated, they may have, if they have suddenly, it's 20 homes, let's say they build 10 right away. Well, you're getting some tax base off of that. So it may manipulate the number. It may change the number a little bit. Whereas, and then depending on assess value, if that assess value goes up, it may drop it. But this is just kind of bare bones. Upon completion, it would take you 8.5 years to recoup that cost.
My next one would be for the improvements. I guess the way I was looking at from the previous ones in discussion, this would be the number 4 on the second page there.
Yep.
I guess I myself, not speaking for anybody else, I would be in favor from A until D. Is what I really consider infrastructure into a property. The other stuff is kind of
A until E.
D. So or I guess we could do any of them, but I myself would be A, B, C, and D. Then the other stuff would be not included in this repayment plan. Last one would kind of be going on based on Ken's comments earlier in the meeting here. We're talking about putting covenants on, and I know there's certain different types, but means this is a case where a developer would be getting some money from the city, even if he does meet the, the 70-foot lot size, 8,000 square foot overall lot size, means he's getting reimbursement or money from the city. I would think that the city would at that time be able to put in, the house has to be 1,500 square feet. It does have to have a 2-car garage because he's receiving money from us. Now, if he just wants to go and do a 20-lot subdivision that meets all the requirements on his own and not ask for any city money, then we wouldn't have any reason to put on there. But being we're going to give him money, taxpayers' money, I would think there should be a point there where we could say, yes, each home has to be 1,500 square feet. I'm just throwing generic numbers here.
Yep.
Our garage, must be of this type of siding, and at the end should have at least have a value of a certain price. So I'm not sure if I'm correct on that or not, but I think we would be able to.
Yeah. So to answer that question, you certainly could do that. So what I would recommend, or what I've seen in previous places I've been, is that is and Joe, you can probably chime into this, but typically when you enter into a development agreement, you can put in there as one of the exhibits exactly what you just indicated, Isaac, is as part of the development agreement approval, is they have to agree to a restricted covenant or additional, you don't have to call it that. It's essentially
Well, the
additional parameters that you are requiring. So you can either have it be, as a city, we can create a standard we did that in Hobart I was in, had that. We had a restricted covenant that went on every single property as an addition that was specific village requirements that we had. So you could do the same thing there. To answer your first question, because I know you asked about kind of funding sources, you got two options. Either, yep, as a city, we could decide we're going to go and earmark or set aside X amount of dollars, or go and borrow X amount of dollars. And same thing, when that pool is done, it's done. Or we can take the approach as what this is kind of saying is it would be a case by case basis. So we would look at what the development is proposing, kind of determine potentially what's the return on the investment or what it would take. And based on our financial ability, we then would enter into a finance agreement. So there's some options. You can go either way.
When we had the 600 grand early in 2000, did that money come from some special, pool, or did we just, I wasn't on the council. Did you just budget for it, or was there a property sale or some other?
As I recall, I think it was just budgeted as a CIP line item kind of a thing, just
Okay.
that's the way I could be wrong.
So, Lynn, do you have any things that you want to say about this developer agreement?
I was just considering what Isaac was saying. And I was thinking about how, if this is reimbursement, how logistically we could reimburse layman's term from communication and natural, because I think that all of these, with the exception of communication, we could agree on, but then get some type of, like, is there a tax initiative that we would get from communication being added there? Like, then I also see that it's limited. It's not just for the services to their home. So I was just wondering about that, like that dynamic of it. And probably something I just want to read a little more into. Okay, but yeah, that was just what that's where I was with this.
Ken, do you have?
No additions.
Eileen?
Well, I do have concern about the 25%, 35%. I understand the council ultimately makes a decision, but I also look at it at the ways that the city itself would be to actually have additional income and
Right.
get the income from our taxes. So if we go 35 or 45%, it takes 8 years to
15
basically
years.
have any of that money go into the city operating budget. That seems counterproductive to me.
Right.
So I understand development. I am in favor of development, but that is one advantage to just setting an amount.
Yep.
Saying the 600,000, and I don't know that it has to be that. But once that word gets out, a developer knows that if they want to do something, they should probably start now, because that money will be spent first come, first served. Whereas if you go the 25%, we are suddenly, I understand we can say to a developer, no, we're not going to give you 25% because we just don't think we can afford that right now. But that's difficult, to tell a developer after they've decided to come to our community. And now we're saying, well, the 25%, we can't do it this year. So if we had a set amount, it seems like to me, that's a little better idea. And the 35 and 45, again, I know a council would have to approve it. That just seems unrealistic to me.
Actually, within the agreement, it uses the word shall be increased. It doesn't use the word may be increased. It uses the word shall. The reimbursement shall be increased as follows, based on dates occupancy permits are granted for the lots within the development. So it doesn't look to me like it looks to me like the only thing that the council has latitude with is the number of permits issued, not. And were these occupancy permits or were these building permits?
Correct. So this would be occupancy. So it is a completely building inspected and approved
but it doesn't say occupancy anywhere.
I think it does later on in the, where did I see that?
That's where I'm reading.
Incentivize the developer to expedite development reimbursement shall be increased as follows based on the dates occupancy permits are granted.
There you go.
For the lots within the development. The other question, and I understand this can probably be determined, but there is a line in here where it also says that the developer may ask for payment or something, partial payment, I think it was perhaps called. I think that was in the Fox Ridge development as well.
Mhm.
And I don't know if we actually did that, but I guess there's partial payment, but if then suddenly the development stops, then you made a partial payment for a development that never went any. I understand that you would have to, the developer would have to justify and explain and give the liens and all that. And the city would do due diligence to make sure that all of that was correct. But again, if they were gonna do 3 streets and now they did 2 and now they're done and we made a partial payment, I'm not sure I agree with that because
Sure.
it's not what the developer said they were going to do.
Right. Nope.
So
I think if
those-
you look at number 3, that would state that what they anticipated doing would have to be done. Then until all conditions are satisfied. So,
And no portion shall be paid until all conditions are satisfied. I guess, Jason,
So in terms of the public improvements eligible for reimbursement, the A through H, are there ones that are like kind of standard in terms of what, the majority of municipalities kind of use in terms of those, the things that they reimburse?
Yeah, I mean, I would say what you see in here is a example of what is kind of considered options. I think to Isaac's point, I would say probably A through D, I would consider to be the standards
Okay.
are typical the infrastructure. E through H are definitely, I've seen them in development agreements. I've seen them in financial agreements. It's up to, all of this is again with the intention to spur development. So the more the sweeter the cake, or use whatever euphemism you want or term, the more enticing it's going to be. So I don't think you're going to have any issues with A through D. You're giving you're giving assistance one way or the other. It's just a matter of how far do you want to move that needle? Do you want it to be more open where, somebody, communications may be their big issue and hey, if they're going to get reimbursed for it, great. But otherwise, the standards I would say are your, water main, sewer, storm and street. Those are the basics.
And then along the lines of enticing development, when we were discussing, should we have like a lump sum that runs out, or if we do a case by case, is there, in terms of those 2 options, is there one or the other that, kind of would entice development more, or would it just kind of depend on the situation?
I think the issue you're going to run into is if you do a finite amount, it's a window in time. So you're kind of hoping that with whatever money you have, there is somebody that knows that and is going to come. So the issue is if it's, let's say you have $1 million and we get 3 developers, that's great. But now what do we do? So it's kind of that, I think on a case by case basis, for longevity for the city, you're creating a precedent and it's something that can withstand, for future years, for future developments. Whereas, as you've seen before, we've kind of had bits and spurts. Now, some of this also is because of the fact that we've had some very successful TIF districts that do not allow us to create other TIF districts for subdivisions. So that's one of the reasons why this is not a bad tool to continue to have in the tool belt. So I guess if you're looking for my recommendation, I would say it might make more sense just to have a standardized, hey, this is the form, and we look at it on a case-by-case basis of financial ability versus kind of the game of, well, these 5 years, we're going to have $1 million and then we're not going to do anything. And then 5 years from now, we'll have another chunk of money. Whereas if this is just standard, regardless of our TIF status, we have a mechanism that continually fund a developer if they're looking to do something that is not inside a TIF district. Because that could be, it may be, let's say all of a sudden somebody buys up a bunch of property that's not in a TIF district. This is a tool that we will always have then that can be utilized. So it's more a question. I mean, we can do it a bunch of different ways, but it's, either we're going to continually have to refund that pot or we deal it on a case by case basis.
I'll make the counter argument for that. And the counter argument, in my opinion, the counter argument to that is if you set an amount and say this is the amount, then there's a sense of urgency among the developers that says, if I want to develop and I want to be a part of that, then I got to get my act together and get a plan in. Because if I could lope along here saying I'm going, and it's kind of open-ended. So if it doesn't happen this year, well, then maybe it'll happen next year. So to me, the counter to that is if you say you have this much, I mean, that's what and I'm not saying one's right or wrong.
Nope.
I'm just saying, the counter argument is the sense of urgency.
You're hitting it on the head. My job is to always give you options and alternatives.
And
There's no right or wrong answer.
And I see that in the developers agreements that you shared for Fox Ridge and for, I guess the other one was for what? Oak Haven, Oak. They had A through I actually in one of them, not only A through H, but A through I in one. The next one had the A through H. And I guess one of the things that I would point out is that when we're doing street reconstructions now, we're putting in conduit for cable. And I would assume that in any new development like this, we would want to put in conduit for cable.
Correct.
And I don't know if that's H.
That would pretty much be H,
That would be, because I don't think we have cable TV main lines anymore, and basic telephone anymore, but I think the whole idea of putting in conduit for fiber optic cable is something we should think about. I just think H is kind of out of date. I don't think it really expresses what. So I would suggest that in the street construction, we indicate somewhere in there that would include some kind of, is that where we put it with street construction, or do we, I don't know, but I would be in favor of including that conduit because we do that. I'm Kathy.
I think some of the questions I had have already been answered, but the percentage thing versus the whole amount is really
The 25, 35, 45.
yeah.
You're bothered by the,
Yeah, and then I look at that, because in that 2A and B, where you talk about so many permits, we've got a date of January 30, and then B is January 1st of 25. Are those dates? Are we looking at this to be something that's in effect through 2030? Or
So-
are these just?
Yeah, this is just an example. So you can change the dates however you want. So the way
Okay,
it showcases in here is, So if you, and that's the option is as the council, you can decide, this is just one example of how you want to determine the 35 and 45%. You can choose whatever percentage you want, but basically what this looks at is what this is saying in this model is if you're doing 20 homes, if you do all 20 homes within 5 years, you get a 45% incentive. If you do them in 10 years, we'll give you a 35. And then if it takes you until perpetuity to get it done, you have the bare minimum of 25. Now you may still want to put some type of restriction on there because I don't think we want to just have it be open-ended. But that's basically, it's the parameter of, again, you want to work with the developer to have them be successful. So I don't think any developer wants to wait 26 years on a return on their product. So it's within realism. It's what, can you both sides agree to as the completion date of this entire subdivision?
That answers my question.
So Adam, this in all effect, it'd actually be a multi-year payment plan, correct? Because you would have say, means we're late in the year, we'll just use 2022. The development is finalized in 2022, so there's your 25%. Now all of a sudden, in these 5 years, all of a sudden they mash out all the homes. Now they're expecting the next 10%.
Correct. Right. So that's the way you can structure it.
I had a question and probably just because I haven't read it and tried to figure it out. The developer shall reduce the price of each lot. This is number 6.
Mhm.
Within the development by an amount equal to the maximum amount of reimbursement to be paid by the city for public improvements divided by the total number of buildable lots within the development. So how does this work? I'm trying to figure out how this works.
Yeah, and this is something that I'm gonna have to go back to Bill on a little bit and get some clarification, because when he explained it, it makes sense, but unless you hear it, you and I are on the same page. It's a little bit, my understanding is essentially, okay, if he normally is going to sell the developer comes in and they are gonna sell a lot, and normally that price would be, I don't know, let's use round numbers, $30,000 for the lot. They have to reduce the cost essentially so that it goes in favor of the building by the incentive. So that way they're not getting paid
Okay,
twice.
so if the lot prices were set at $20,000
Maybe, yeah,
and they were getting, and it was 20 lots, and they were going to get a $400,000 reimbursement, you take the $400,000
divided by the number of
divided by the
lots.
number of lots.
that's essentially
reduce
what they
the
have to profit by.
number, reduce the price.
Right. So,
That was a
Okay.
requirement that the city put on the last time we did this program.
So who set the price of the, how was the price of the, I mean,
The developer set the price of the lot, but the intent of that was the council was trying to get the developer to reduce the price that they would charge the end purchaser. That was the intent.
okay, so the price of the lot had nothing to do with, I mean, the council didn't set the price of the lot. So if I, yeah,
You could raise the price of the lot.
I could
and
raise
sell
the
it
price of the
for
lot and then just use this to decrease it back to
Wherever
where,
you're gonna sell it. or-
where I was gonna sell it in the first place.
right.
Yeah, I was confused by that. So, and I don't think we have anything that says anything about an average cost of a lot because there aren't a lot of lots sold in Platteville. So I don't know how you would figure up what an average cost of a lot would be. So, okay, I just was kind of, okay.
Nope, good ask.
Yeah, I'd like to hear a little bit more about how that works. All right, so from this discussion, are we looking to ask for any additions or changes? The one thing I asked for was some mention in this document that this development agreement is not for use if residential developments occur in a TIF. I don't know where you put that, but that's one thing I asked for.
I think that would go, we could add it into the second whereas, where it says, whereas the developer desires to undertake a residential development, we could put it right in there. That is not located within. a
Well,
TIF.
you can figure out.
We can figure it out.
You can figure it out where to put it. I've heard some discussion about the 35 and the 45%. And I know, Adam, you said that this was discretionary, that the city could decide, but then I see the word shall.
Yes,
Number
so
2. So I guess,
we can tweak number 2 to be may or something along.
or
those
something
lines.
like that.
Yep.
Okay. And so it may be up to 45%.
Correct.
Okay.
Shall and adjust the numbers to what you feel. more
That's the other
comfortable.
option too.
And then, yeah, adjust the numbers. Okay, so that was it. We've heard some discussion about number 4, the public improvements. Isaac has suggested a limitation to A through D.
Of your conduit for the,
And I have suggested we somehow include, since we're doing that in street construction anyway, we should be putting conduit in. I think that that's a great incentive for people to buy there if they know they can get fiber to their house. I know that electrical and natural gas were included before. I guess my question, and Dan is here now. When the rough estimate was given of the cost of infrastructure, which was 1.5 for this development was electrical, including mainline transformer, streetlights, etc., and natural gas, were those included in that? Oh, they were. Okay. So, you know, I don't know. What's the feeling of everybody?
It's worth the other examples that I've seen in communities, they limit the reimbursement to basically infrastructure that eventually the city is going to own and maintain. So it would be basically Isaac's list plus sidewalks, because eventually, you know, those will be public sidewalks, but that seems to be kind of a logical dividing line that I've seen and
Conduit wouldn't be maintained by the city, but that's
be an exception.
it is
Yeah.
maintained by the city. I see Howard's head wagging. I don't know what.
Yes.
It is maintained by the city, the conduit
The
for,
conduit would be maintained by the city until unless we leased it or donated it to a telecommunications company
Okay.
for some reason.
okay, so if that's common, then I think, what's the feeling? I don't want to dictate this. I want you all to say, do you want A through G? Do you want A through D?
like whatever, Joe's explanation, anything that would eventually be maintained or
Maintained or-
replaced by the
By the
city.
city. Okay,
I'd be okay with that too.
okay,
I-
Good.
so, yeah.
okay. And then you're going to get us kind of a more explanation about this lot price.
Correct.
Because I'm reading through that 3 and 4 times and I'm getting more.
Yeah, that's some
confused.
lawyer
Every
lingo, as I like to
time
call
I-
it. So. we'll
And
get
then
you-
the whole mortgage thing, I'm
Yeah.
now scratching my head. So,
And then,
Understood.
then also what we discussed earlier about the developers agreement on, it'd be generic right now about, the lots, or not lot size, excuse me, the home size is where we put that at, or if that would be an additional item.
Sure.
yeah, I don't know where that would be. Only direct, yeah. So probably they're somehow between 6 and 7 would be if there are additional parameters relative to, it would seem to be, that would be maybe the place. I don't know.
Mhm.
Okay.
One other question, is this something that the council would have to approve every year to continue this program? The reason I ask that is I'm thinking 25% of what it costs to build today is not going to be the same as 25% in 5 years. And so again, I'm looking at the city budget and saying, okay, if you're saying, and I guess the option then would be to just say to the developer, sorry, the money's not there this year, we can't do it. And if we're trying to be consistent and encourage development, it'd be nice to know that we were renewing it every year or not renewing it, we would have said or something. I don't know.
Right. So I mean, there's a couple of options. We certainly, we can do that either way. So yes, we could, potentially bring it up after the budget has been, either before the budget or kind of around this time, have a discussion going, okay, going into the budget process, is this something that the city still wants to consider? And if it is, it's just a motion to, continue the potential, and staff will, just like any, it'll be a part of any development agreement or any process, is you'll have this document that'll have to be agreed upon by the city. So yeah, it's going to be budget dependent.
Yeah, and I think somehow we have to say that. I guess the other thing I would challenge council members to do is think about open-ended versus the
Right.
sense of urgency. If you say it's so much within so much time, I'm not saying by December 31st, and I don't know that there is a right or wrong. I think that it's just, as you think about it and talk about it to yourself or talk about it with others, think about, is there, in some ways, I feel we do have a sense of urgency in getting additional single family
Right.
houses.
Yep.
So I think there is a sense of urgency there. The question is, how do we extend that urgency to others? And on the other hand, we want nice developments. We don't want, so.
Great.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can put away for right now the subdivision reimbursement agreement. And Adam, unless someone sees a reason not to, I think with the explanations of the lot stuff
Yep.
and the
And the
changes,
proposed changes, we can
I
bring it
think we
back.
could probably move this to action at the next meeting.
I guess I would just come back to Eileen's point. Are we gonna look at this every?
And we probably, I don't know that we build a date in that this is effective through the end of December 2022. Or
No, so essentially the way this agreement is written right now is it's whatever dates you want to put in. So right now it is basically open-ended to it's an option that as staff, we can propose to a developer and then it goes through the process. Same thing as a development agreement, it'll have the stipulations. So it'll be something that as it goes through the process, it'll be an approval. So it's certainly something I think that, to your point, we could have it come back and revisit if there are changes you want to make to some of the parameters where, let's say for budget restrictions, we may have to go less. Then we could make those changes. Every year we could kind of bring that up as a discussion.
I think that in our strategic plan for the last 2 or 3 years, we've had the housing initiative, a
Yes.
housing initiative of some type. So I think that it's appropriate that we review all of the processes and policies we've enacted for housing kind of on a regular basis so that we know.
I would
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let us then go on to.
So Dan's here. Do you want to go back to?
Sure. We can go back to B. Because then we have sewer and water. All right, so let's go back to B, the preliminary plat and planning map for Southwest Health development there. Joe.
Yeah, so this is a request submitted by Southwest Health. They own some land, 27 acres of land adjacent to the hospital's main property, basically to the north and to the west. They are looking at doing a development of that property. It's very preliminary at this point, which is why it's a preliminary plat and actually a planning map. But they're looking at doing a kind of a combination mixed use development, some commercial uses, some residential uses. They're primarily thinking it'd be, office or other businesses that are health related, medical related, something that's compatible to the hospital services there. The residential would probably be a combination of different types, some elderly housing, maybe some care type facility housing, nursing home type facilities, something along those lines. But this would be kind of the starting point of that development. So right now they're just looking at taking that land, doing a preliminary plat that would divide it into 5 lots as a starting point. So with the idea that those lots would most likely be further subdivided in the future once they have a better idea of, what's the actual development, what's the size of land that particular building needs, that particular facility needs, and then they divide that lot as necessary for that. So the property is accessible off East Side Road. The utilities are in East Side Road, so there would be an extension of a new public street heading west, and then it would split and head north and south. The utilities would kind of do the same thing, come off East Side Road and then follow that street development. So the lots as they are proposed now range from 1.36 acres to 11.23 acres, but as I mentioned, that's just kind of a starting point with the idea that that's going to be probably some additional CSMs in the future to divide that as we go along. As you get further west, the lot 5 area, you can tell that in particular is very conceptual because they actually have it drawn as dotted lines. So with the idea that, obviously you're going to start from where the infrastructure already is and then go in phases to serve the development as that comes along. The only issue from a staff standpoint, and since it's a conceptual idea, it's not a big issue, but as that cul-de-sac is drawn out there now, it exceeds the maximum length of a cul-de-sac under our ordinances. So that would have to be addressed to be compatible with the ordinance. And also just from a long-term development planning potential, it'd be nice to have an extension to that land to the west. So I think those two issues could be addressed at the same time. But I like how they have that extension to the north, so that allows future extension for additional development to the north. So it'd be nice to have a similar type of extension to the west. But otherwise, as proposed for the main part of it, it would be compatible with the subdivision ordinance. The comprehensive plan identifies that land as residential and mixed use, so it's very much in line with what was anticipated for that area. So staff does recommend approval of the preliminary plat. The Plan Commission reviewed it and also recommended approval of the plat as well. Questions?
Okay, questions of Joe and or Dan is here, and Delta 3 drew this preliminary plat. So any questions from the council?
Not a question, but I believe one of the comments was made at Planning Commission that due to the terrain, a lift station would not be required for the humming. So the terrain actually makes it run perfect for additional.
I think that the sewage line goes down behind Culver's, right? Yeah. Yeah, it's gravity feed. That's good. And the water's there. So any other questions about this? Because it would be on the agenda for a public hearing on September 28th, our next meeting. So there would be a public hearing on this. Dan, do you have anything you want to add?
Dan Dressens with Delta 3 Engineering. First, thanks for postponing this so I could give a little presentation here. I think Joe did a good job of explaining kind of what the purpose of this preliminary plat is. Primarily what we're looking at with working with the hospital is developing lots 1 and lot number 3, which are going to be basically from East Side Road up to the EMS garage. So if you want to kind of have a reference point out there, that's kind of where it's at. With lots 2 on the north side and lots 4 on the south side as options for some residential if they would need to do that, if they want to proceed with that. But primarily we're focusing on getting up to the commercial area taken care of. Joe mentioned it's going to be medical or a compatible type of use. We still want to continue that thought process. We're in the process right now of completing our final design for water main, sanitary sewer, as well as stormwater management. And so this is just one step in the process. But the other thing is we'll be preparing final plans for Howard to review, and then getting that submitted to the DNR for both stormwater management, water main and sanitary sewer. So I think you'll see some of that. The intent is that this gets approved at the next meeting, that they will actually start working this fall if weather permits. So that's kind of the game plan right now. So I just kind of wanted to kind of give a little update on the schedule. And then if there are any questions, I can answer those too.
So any questions?
Thank you.
Okay, you might as well stay there because we're going to go right on to 860. Okay, so this will be on for public hearing at our next meeting, which is September 28th. All right, the next item then that would be the rezoning for 860 Mason Street. So Joe?
Yeah, so 860 Mason Street is the, well, it formerly was the Platteville Township Hall and Shop building. It was sold several years ago. The applicant purchased that. He's actually been working with Delta 3. They've done a lot of improvements to that building. But it's primarily used for personal and his own business related type storage. But what he's looking at is that preparing at least for the option to have the ability to use part of that building for residential use. The current zoning, the M1 heavy commercial light industrial was kind of a remnant of when the county shop and the town shop was located on that property. The neighborhood business allows kind of a combination of some business related type uses for that would be compatible for more of a residential type neighborhood. So it gets away from that heavy commercial light industrial use, but it also allows some residential use of the property. So that's something wants to at least have that option available to use the overhead garage storage, former shop area for storage, but maybe the former town hall itself as a residential use. So this rezoning wouldn't require that change, but at least allow it. So from a staff standpoint, as I look at it, to me, it's a much more ideal district for that location because you've got residential to the south and west of this property already. You've got actually R1, R2, and R3 are all adjacent to this particular property. So some of those uses that would be allowed in the M1 district really would not be compatible for that location, where the B1 is much more restrictive on the heavy type uses that I wouldn't want to see there. So to me, it makes sense from that standpoint. So staff does recommend approval of the request. Any questions?
Any questions from council? Dan, do you have anything to add to this?
No, I think at the plan commission, I don't think there was a lot of questions about it, other than I think most agreed that it was a good rezone.
I have a question.
Okay, Ken?
I'm looking at this picture on about the last page, so.
Yep.
Yeah, you're saying that they might use this former meeting building as housing. Is that correct?
That's correct. That's
And then this big garage with 3 big doors would be right next to it. Is that correct?
correct.
So it seems a little odd to have this residential hooked right onto this large storage area.
Not necessarily. I mean, the meeting area, the former meeting area already has bathroom facilities in it. The original plan prior to even thinking about doing a residence was to do the man cave with a entertainment area. And all they're looking at is the potential to be able to put sleeping quarters in there as well. If you drive around the countryside, you'll see a lot of they call them shelters, a shed house combination where they have a very similar situation, except for instead of being, these don't see many of them in town. So in the rural areas, that's very popular.
Yeah, because to me, it looks a little strange. Okay, then as far as the housing around the rest of the area, do you have any idea what the size of the housing is going to be as far as the lot sizes? It's going to be,
Those are all developed around it.
Yes, yes. All the lots, all the properties around this have been developed. And this lot is, what's remaining is vacant, is not allowed to be subdivided. So if there's anything added to this, it'll be an addition onto this property. So there'll be no new house. It's just going to be an addition onto this if they would like to do something like that.
addition on to what?
To this existing building.
To this little place where they had a meeting place plus the big storage. They're going to add on to that.
Yes, and that's all they'd be able to do. They would not be able to subdivide that lot and create a second property there. It's not large enough to meet setback requirements.
Well, then I looked at it today, then is a big storage affordable storage? Is that part of this block too?
It's part of the block, but it's not part of the property. So the affordable storage is the property to the north.
It's not owned by Schneller?
Correct.
Okay.
Neither is the blue building next to it, right?
Yeah, correct. And now there is the blue building between this building and Jeff
Just
Sayoko.
Sayoko.
That I don't know if Jeff still owns that. He does, okay. But that's just used as a storage building by him.
Anyway,
So this is just basically the former town of Platteville Town Hall and
yes,
Shop,
shop.
correct, yep.
So according to the residential uses in this district would have the same regulations as R2, 1 and 2 family districts. So I'm reading that it could, the area that they're talking for residential could be made into a duplex. Onto that. Is that correct?
Right,
Joe?
yes, right. It'd be limited to either single family or duplex, but the other restriction, the way it's worded that way is in order to be used as a duplex, it would have to meet the duplex size requirements for that lot. In this case, it would, so it would be eligible for a duplex if they decided to go that route.
so looking at this, the meeting area could be raised. RAISED
I mean, it could, they could add a second story.
could be 30 feet high, is that correct? That's what I looked up. Building height, 30 feet maximum, so they could build this higher so that to be able to blend in more with the storage. Is that correct?
Yes, anything's possible.
No, under B1, it says the building height, B1, the height maximum is 30 feet. So this little this little meeting area is not 30 feet tall. So they
Yes, I
can
guess
raise
the current or a future owner could, yeah, could raise the roof to 30 feet if they'd like.
But to me, it looks, since I was raised on the farm and I've seen on a farm building, this looks little.
Okay. Anybody else with questions on 860 Mason Street? Otherwise, I think this also is scheduled for public hearing for September 28th, that meeting.
Yep.
Okay. If you have any questions, make sure and get them to Joe. All right, thank you, Dan. We will now return to the agenda and we will actually go to the next agenda item, which is Chapter 8 Sewer Service Revision.
Yes.
Howard.
Yes, thank you. The city of Platteville's ordinances for sanitary sewer service is Chapter 8. It has served us since its last revision in 1985. It's well overdue. Public Service Commission granted our request to remove the sanitary sewer service from their authority to establish rates so that we can do that locally. This ordinance has been updated to show that the Water and Sewer Commission would recommend rates to you as the Common Council for adoption. Enclosed as red line version, or actually blue line version of items to add, change, or delete from the current ordinance. Some of these things include charging our industrial users for items such as nitrogen and phosphorus discharge. We also updated the penalties section to increase forfeitures to be more in line with today's costs. One of the things is that this will provide the authority for the council to increase sewer rates, which is a subsequent action. The Water and Sewer Commission reviewed this. Both the commission and staff recommend approval.
Okay, questions on this? And Isaac, do you, as chair of the Water and Sewer Commission, do you have anything you want to say first about this revision of Chapter 8?
About the only thing I'd like to say is long overdue. So I think it makes it easier for now and for the future for the staff as well as Howard to implement any changes or penalties that should arise. So I think it's a great change and update.
Okay. Questions of anybody else on the revision for Chapter 8 sewer service? Lynn, any questions? Ken,
No questions. I'm on the Water and Sewer Commission.
you're right. Eileen?
No, just maybe perhaps a comment, Howard. Is this unusual for a city to have the ability to set the own sewer rates?
Actually, the reverse is the, is, would be the unusual. Out of all the communities in the state of Wisconsin, only a handful, like 4 or 5, have rates established by the Public Service Commission. All the rest of them do it locally.
Which is why we went about getting that change made.
Correct.
Okay. Jason, any questions?
No.
Kathy, any questions?
Just procedural. This has been what, 5 years since this was?
1985 was,
Okay,
is there a reason we waited so long to
Should
look
there
at
be-
chapter 8?
Yeah, and would there be appropriate to put a plan in place? I mean, how often should this be addressed?
I think now that Adam's here, I think a lot of ordinances and changes are actually going to be addressed, yearly or, biannually here instead of, let's see, 85s, looking at 35 years, 30 years.
So Kathy, that's one of the things that we've talked about before is we need kind of, for lack of a better word, I'm going to say a maintenance plan for our ordinances. When I was on the school board, we looked at each policy. We had a kind of a schedule that we looked at policies, A through, on a rotating basis. And I can't remember if it was a 3 or a 5 year rotating basis, but every, that didn't mean that anything necessarily changed, but it meant that in that year, somebody took a look and said, is there a need to make a change? So you're right. 1985 to is, quite a
Yes.
while ago.
So as long as you will continue to put up with me, my goal is to keep doing that every couple of years. So
Okay, so this would just, does this need to go to public hearing?
I don't believe it does, but we're looking at the possibility, I think, of a resolution to have you guys officially adopt it or approve it. So
Well, I
we'll
know we
double
have
check
to
on it.
officially adopt or approve it. I just didn't know if we had to do it by a public hearing.
It probably wouldn't be a bad idea just because of the fact that you are making changes. So we'll make sure that's the case.
Okay, I mean, I don't,
Yeah.
I don't care. I just don't want to enact it and then somebody comes back and says, well, actually, you didn't enact it because you should have had a public
Right.
hearing. So I'd rather err on the side
Yes.
of,
I would say we probably would.
Yeah.
So
okay, the next item then E was the chapter 8. F would then be setting a sewer rate charge.
Correct.
All right, so one of the things about deregulating from the Public Service Commission was it used to be the Public Service Commission that set the rate. Now it's the Water and Sewer Commission that reviews and then makes a recommendation to the council.
Correct.
So go ahead.
Yes, yeah, we took this to the Water and Sewer Commission, had some discussion, and the Water and Sewer Commission recommends a 5% increase in both the meter charge, which is the fixed rate, and the volume charges. And you can see the chart on the next item. We hadn't had a sewer rate increase since 2016, so it's time to do that. We've been working with Ellers and MSA to develop rates. And this would help us fund the current operations and debt service. The Water and Sewer Commission and staff recommend approval of this 5% rate increase for 2022, essentially.
Yeah, this would,
I mean, we might be able to implement it sooner, like November, but the plan would be that it would be in effect for all of 2022.
Okay, questions on the proposed sewer rates?
This one here, a little bit more history on what Howard's stating there. So it'd be the remainder of 2021 and then all of 2022. Original plan was to do a smaller increase in 2021 and then another increase in 2022 right away. So the Water and Sewer Commission decided that we'd set a lower flat rate for the remainder of the 21 and then all of 22 instead of doing a back. I would also say that the last one was in 2016 is when the last rate was done. So this basically is allowing us hopefully not have to keep putting so many bonds and borrowing out there power. Actually,
Okay, questions? Kathy?
Go to the same topic. Is this, are the rates reviewed? I mean, this is 2016, so we're at that 5-year.
Well,
so there already actually was a rate, a suggested rate increase for the next so many years. And those are just suggestions based on what Nicola and Ellers keeps coming up annually
an MSA.
and seeing what the MSA, yep, and seeing what the projected costs are going to be. Those rates can be adjusted up or down, or if not any increase, to offset those. So those will be done annually, starting at the end of 2022 now, instead of just this year.
Okay, so kind of an explanation of that is when our sewer utility was regulated by the PSC, we didn't have the ability to change the rate. So the only way the rate could change was we presented a rate case and sent it to the PSC. And then the PSC has hearings and decide and looks at your financials. And then in about 8 or 10 months, they tell you if you can actually increase the rates. And this was kind of and as Howard pointed out, in terms of standard practice across the state, we were one of a handful of communities that still did it that way. And so by not being regulated by the PSC, we'll have more ability to move forward in a more timely manner with our rates. Okay. By the way, we don't have that ability with our water rates, and we submitted a rate case application to change rates, and the PSC has sent it back, and so now we get to provide them with more information and then consider it. So, you know, it's always about, oh, you know, now we need this. Okay, let's go on then to the water disconnection policy.
Yes, so as we've obviously been reviewing kind of sewer rates and changes, one of the things we wanted to kind of update or kind of create or more or less cement in stone is the policy for water disconnects. So with the return of water disconnection of services for a customer who has not paid a bill in full, or for a customer who has defaulted on an arranged deferred payment agreement, again, we look to review kind of all of our current policies and create this new finalized policy, which went for consideration by the Water and Sewer Commission and obviously is now to you guys as the Common Council. So the purpose of this policy is to establish guidelines that are to be followed kind of in a uniform manner, exercised consistently, and in accordance with the rules of the Wisconsin Administrative Code, Chapter PSC 185. So typically payments are due the 20 calendar days from the date of the billing when we send out a bill. So for example, a bill issued on September 30th is due October 20th. The policy breaks out into sections what happens after 10 days past the due date. Section E of this policy is the procedure that council members are going to want to take specific note of. It explains the process in which after 3 days, a customer who has remained disconnected at a residence will be referred to the billing inspector. After an investigation by the building inspector, it shall be determined if a residence is uninhabitable due to not having water and sewer service. The building inspector then will placard the residence, which will prohibit occupancy until the delinquency is resolved. And really the main reason we want to do that is because of a health and safety issue. We don't want an individual living in a residence that doesn't have access to water and sewer service. So it really is something that we want to ensure that, you know, for public health and for public safety, we're being on top of that. So city staff obviously would like to discuss with council members any concerns or alterations they would like to see to the policy. There really is no budgetary or fiscal impact to note at this point in time. So the recommendation is the Water and Sewer Commission at their September meeting approved a recommendation for adoption of the proposed policy by the Common Council. And city staff also is recommending the Common Council formally adopt the City of Platteville policy on water disconnects.
Okay, folks, at least 3 of us have been through this the multiple times.
You've seen it a lot.
We've seen it a lot. I think Adam explained that the real consideration here is if a residence does not have water and sewer, it is not habitable. And there was really nothing in our policy procedure or ordinances that said that.
Correct.
And there had been reports that there were people who had been disconnected who were living in residence without
Correct.
water and sewer, which is certainly not healthy for them and not healthy for their neighbors either. So section E is that section that deals with disconnections and occupancy. Anybody with questions on this?
My only question is, so kind of related to our discussion on homelessness and resources, how does that work with this? Like, if people are struggling, is there a process in terms of like helping them with resources, or what does that look like?
Yeah, so certainly when somebody has an issue if it's financial reasons or whatever may happen, the PSC, the Public Service Commission, does allow the city to enter into what's called a deferred payment arrangement. So what that means is there is a percentage that they have to pay. So with this policy, they would be required to, put down 30% of the bill. And then as long as they continue, then it's an agreement. So whether that's $5, $10. Again, the end goal is to try to get it paid by the end of the year so that it doesn't get put on the tax roll or any consideration like that. And as long as they're on a deferred payment agreement, it does not go on the tax roll and it's current. So what happens there is they're able to enter into, say it's $5, $10, whatever is agreeable, as long as they're continuing to maintain their current payment along with the agreement, we continue to work with them on that. When they don't, then that's unfortunately then we have to talk about procedures, but there certainly is that I think is something we'll be talking about tied is there are resources that I've known in other municipalities that whether it's, the Salvation Army or other, particular groups that they can ask for resources where they'll come in and they'll pay their bill. I've known churches to do that. They have some assistance opportunities. So I think this kind of goes hand in hand. This is the policy that shows as a city what we're doing. And then it's now that next step is when we are hearing about people that are struggling, that could potentially be, in a homelessness or vacated situation, what resources can we provide them?
Does the deferred payment, for the most part, does that usually kind of help resolve the situation, or?
It varies, for the most part, yes. I mean, we try to work with every individual who is on a deferred payment arrangement to be, applicable to understanding their circumstances. Sometimes they're handled and sometimes they're not. So our hope is that, with the deferred payment agreement is that it's something that can be successful. We work with them and that they're able to pay it off. If not, then unfortunately, it is a service. So we do have to kind of deal with those. Eventually at a point we have to make a decision and say, there's only so many times we can do this or go down that road. And that's kind of what this policy does is it is the mechanism for which, we're hopeful that they can pay the bill. But if they can't, we have, as a city, we have a duty with it being, a service that we're providing to ensure that it's being utilized.
Okay. I know that like utility companies like Alliant has something where you can like add, $1, every month on your bill that goes towards assistance. Is that something that potentially could be looked at for sewer and water?
That's a good question. We'd have to do some digging on that one.
Okay.
To see if there's any, it always comes down to whether or not the PSC has any issues with that or funding sources, but we could certainly look into it.
Okay.
Actually, having this agreement changes that, the mutual agreement between $5 or $10 actually goes to a minimum of 10% of what the water bill is. So whereas before, as Adam stated, it kind of a case by case where this one here, it's automatically set at least 10% of what the water bill was.
Okay.
Okay.
Mhm.
So that would be on for action at our next meeting. I don't think that requires a public hearing. Okay, next item on our agenda are council rules.
All right, so we're gonna breeze through these pretty quick because the ones we have to review tonight are, I think, pretty straightforward. So we're gonna be looking at rules number 5 through 11. So rule number 5 currently states the following. So this is in regards to Robert's Rules of Order. So it is the official, what do we as the city of Platteville or you as the common council want to consider to be the official parliamentarian guide that you want to follow? So currently right now, we follow the rules contained in Robert's Rules of Order revised. So the question for you guys is, are you comfortable with continuing to use that? Or do you want us to do some more research into what is the most updated version of Robert's Rules of Order? That's kind of up to your pleasure. So I guess what is the, what's the feeling of the group? You know, currently we're using revised. I know there were some questions about should we go to the most updated version? So that's up to you to kind of consider.
I would suggest that the version I looked at earlier this year relative to meetings held via Zoom or via telephone, there is now a Robert's Rules of Order that includes how you know, kind of those rules. So I think if we're going to continue and or allow people to attend via Zoom and or attend in another way, that we probably should reference a Robert's Rules of Order that has that information in it in case anybody wants to. So, and I don't know if Robert's Rules of Order revised has that in it or not.
And so that's something I can certainly look into as kind of when we
Yeah.
get to the approval process. That was going to be my recommendation, but again, you guys can, it's your show. You can do whatever, you can follow whatever version you want.
I guess
Well,
for me, I would
supposedly
want.
The latest edition is dated 2020. It's about the 12th edition.
Yes, I would agree with you on that.
I would say whatever is most efficient and the least confusing.
Good luck.
You look it over.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right, so rule number 6, there really are no changes there. So we can skip past that one. Rule number 7, again, no changes there.
Adam, there is one change on the second line.
Oh, sorry, which one? 6 or 7?
Shall not be required to vacate the chair to do so, but may if he desires. Try to say he or she.
Is that in 6 or 7?
That's in number 7.
No, number 7.
Second line.
Good catch. We will make that change. Rule number 8, I didn't see any changes really to make there. That again is about the number and designation of council committees. Rule number 9. So the change here really falls into number 1. We changed the finance director to comptroller. Again, that's just kind of sticking with the times. Is typically now there is a comptroller instead of a finance director. That term isn't used as much before. So that just would make the change there. And then the other thing to consider is we really don't have a claims committee anymore. So that is something we would look to be changing to be either the appropriate committee, board, or commission. So essentially what that is the claims committee, my understanding is it used to be actually like the finance committee. I think, Ken, you're probably the most seasoned veteran here.
Yes, the claims committee for council, we had a meet about an hour and a half, go through all the bills for every meeting.
Sure. So yeah, now what happens is typically the individual committees look at various bills. So the airport committee kind of looks at the bills, and then obviously they're all put into the council document for you guys to approve. So we would be looking to change the claims committee to the appropriate commission, board, or committee or commission. And then lastly, rule number 11, this is kind of in regards to no ordinance or resolution shall be considered by the council unless presented in writing by the council president or any alderperson. The change I'm asking here is to add city manager and city staff to the potential list of presenters, because obviously, depending on where it falls, right now it's saying that basically Barb or one of you guys would be the ones presenting. And hopefully that's why you have us as staff, is to kind of tell you about, hey, you might want to look into this, or we may want to do that. So that's kind of the change there. So that's what we got. Seems pretty basic for this time, so we made it easy. And then next month, we'll go over the next few, kind of go from there.
All right. Flag raising policy.
Okay, so If you go right into the actual policy itself, you'll see in red the areas that I tried to capture a lot of the comments that came out of the last meeting. So again, talking about specifically where all the flags are flown by the city of Platteville will be in accordance with Title IV Flag and Seal, seat of government in the state of the United States Code. So that's where that is going to dictate size, position, everything else. Some of the changes that happened to the policy section in A are with B. We changed it to be associated with a community event that benefits the residents of the city. D was submit the request for a flag raising a minimum of 4 weeks in advance to match the actual application. And then E was changed to be responsible for the cost of providing the city of Platteville with their flag, just kind of cleaning that sentence up. And then later on, under the city clerk and director of public works have the authority to determine the eligibility of each organization. Under B, it was changed to ordinance or policy. And then the area that I think I added the most additional information is under the appeals process. So this was kind of to provide some further clarification or understanding. So what it says is an individual wishing to appeal approval or denial of a flag raising request can submit in writing their request to City of Platteville, obviously our address, attention city manager, or they can submit their request via email at citymanager@platteville.org. And then the Tide Task Force on behalf of the Common Council will be responsible for initially reviewing all submitted appeals requests. The Tide Task Force, after reviewing the information presented by the appeal requester, will make a formal recommendation to the Common Council for their consideration at a future Common Council meeting. So essentially just added some more depth into the appeals process. So any questions, comments, or additions that you feel need to be put into this policy?
Does the Title IV Flag and Seal Seat of Government, the States of the United States Code, I'm still concerned that these flags have to be recognized flags, that I can't just make up my own flag and bring it.
Sure.
So is that what that is? All flags shall be in accordance with Title IV Flag and Seal Seat of Government in the States of the United States Code. I mean, I don't want to get into a situation where somebody makes a flag
Right.
and brings it. I mean, I think these have to be, I don't know how you say official flags. I don't really know how to say that, but I mean.
Sure. So it talks about, I'm looking at the actual document. So it specifically talks about the flag, stripes, and stars. So that directly relates to the United States flag.
Right.
Right. Use of flag present. Displaying.
So I think somebody needs to look through that because
Sure.
I think these have to be standard flags. We can't just have ISO the flag and it represents this group and we're associated with a community event and we're endorsed by a group that's a recognized 501c3. I mean, I think these have to
Today's
be
flag. Yeah. Right.
recognizable flag. I don't even know how to say that.
I was gonna say, Barb, if you're talking about a commercially produced flag, but anybody could do that. So on a flag and have somebody
Right,
make it for me. So you don't want something like that.
right. I want, like, I don't have a,
How would that apply to an organization that is fairly new? Like what would the consideration of standard or normal or how would that fit in? I think I don't know if it would be just as casual as when the person is getting or requesting the flag being raised, that this verbiage be a simple verbiage as what you're trying to say, or, because I'm saying, like, I'm thinking primarily of, I'll use Black Lives Matter, for example. So Black Lives Matter has only been in existence for so many years, but they are being more and more recognized. And if they do an event, I'm just using that for an example, but if they do an event, or we'll say like when Platteville did their, well, participated in the march, so they came up with that logo and that banner, you know, and so say Platt does something in Platteville that is approved, an event that's approved, how would that, how would the flag be judged? Like, how do you judge?
I
You know
don't
what I'm
know.
saying?
I think there's a difference between a banner
Right.
and a flag.
Yeah. Right, but I'm saying, suppose there was I just use that example because that's the latest that has come up in our community. So if they got a flag created to wave, I'm just saying, I'm just using that for an example.
I understand what you're
Right.
saying.
Yeah, so I can look to add some because I think it would be different. It'd be a different part than Title IV, because Title IV is specifically towards the American flag and rules and regulations in regards to that. So I think it would be something that we would have to add under the policy that it'd probably be after E, be responsible for the cost of providing the city of Platteville with their flag. And then there'd be a F that would dictate something along the lines of, you know, it has to be approved by, you know, I think that we would have the discretion if we're going to be flying it, it would have to be approved by us. So it can't just be like, you know, I can't just go to, you know, a flag dealer and have a drawing made and turned into a flag. It has to represent, I would agree, it has to be agreed upon by, you know, the policy and the council. So.
Can you use the word official?
Official flag.
Well, I mean.
I understand. That's what I was.
If,
Yeah.
if you're talking about a specific group, and they wanted to fly a flag, you would assume they would have an flag.
Correct.
Right,
Because you're right, otherwise they're talking about a banner.
right. But could official be like what, so if they have a website or they've already have like a heavily trafficked website and that logo became their flag. I'm just using, because like say Roundtree, the art studio wants to do something and we approve them to do something. It's gonna be at the city park. You know what I'm saying? It falls under the guidelines of what we would regulate. We would say, okay, we're gonna put the flag up. How do you officially tell them? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But does the conversation come back then if we're tying it to a group that is going to have an event? Why wouldn't that group be encouraged to just put the banner up? I mean, there has to be, for a flag to be flown.
Right.
I mean, a banner promotes
A banner
an
promotes the event.
organization
Right.
and an event.
Exactly.
A flag
Usually is
stands
officially.
for
Right.
something.
Right.
Right. So, all right, we talked about Dairy Days. So Dairy Days could have a flag. I don't know that they do have a flag, but let's say Dairy Days did have a flag.
But if they did, would you want a cow?
But I guess the thing I think of is if you have to explain what the flag is, then you really should have a banner. Because the flag should be, to me, something that's recognizable. Like, I mean, nobody has to explain the state of Wisconsin flag. Nobody has to explain a POW flag anymore. These are recognizable flags. If I put a cow up there on a flag and then I have to explain, oh, well, that's the Dairy Days flag and we have it, then I should have a banner.
I totally, I still come back to that
There has to, yeah.
so maybe, I don't know, has the sidebar, is there a policy per se for, I know there's a form to
Banners?
fill out for the banner, like on Water Street.
Mhm.
And is that dictated by, has to be an authorized event? I mean.
I don't have a
does that
clue.
Look like,
There is,
I don't want to muddy the waters,
Right.
but if,
there is a policy for putting a banner up across Water Street. Talk about the size and it actually comes to the council and usually it's on the consent calendar. Approval, like Dairy Days or,
But it's a form, it's not a policy.
Correct.
well, there's a policy that goes with a form request that talks
I'd
about.
like to see that because I mean, what if maybe that can lend some
Sure, I can send you that.
information or whatever to this discussion.
yeah, well, and then maybe part of the outcome of this is to finalize a flag policy, but at the same time reinforce that we have a
banner
banner
policy.
Yep.
policy as well,
For sure.
that,
Might be more,
well, there's just some situations where it'd be more appropriate,
right,
pick Dairy Days.
right.
They would develop an official flag that's. That,
I might have to go back to our previous papers here, but I was thinking I was thinking at one point there, the flag was to be flown in the month that this event was going to be happening. I don't
Right.
see that on here now. So it looks like I can have an organization flag, and I wanted to put it up in October, but my event isn't until December. I thought prior we were having it, so if I wanted in October, that event had to be in that month.
Yeah, I think it was too. I don't know where that went.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Okay, it's not.
That's just, he is just stating that's when I
The
submit it,
request.
that doesn't state that something's going on in that month.
Yeah, we can add that back in if you want that.
Okay, so we'll see the banner policy too, and then maybe we can get some,
Sure.
maybe they're companion pieces somehow. So that ends the items on our information and discussion agenda. It appears we have now a work session on the CIP.